I want to welcome you back to another episode of Laid Back History. And on this episode, we're going to be promoting our upcoming event, Spirits in the Garden. Spirits in the Garden is a signature event for the Historical Society. It combines everybody's favorite spirits. The distilled kind, like whiskey and wine and beer, but also the spirits of the historical figures from Washington County's past. We have wonderful actors and actresses that come in and portray these historical figures. And to kind of get you ready for that, we're going to be talking about a story today that directly impacts the theme of our event this year. And that theme is the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Antietam. Fought on September 17th of 1862, it is the single bloodiest day in American history. You have so many men and boys that give their lives on that day, fighting not only for the Union, but for the South. And it's so fitting that we start our story here today, standing in front of the Civil War Monument up in Washington Cemetery and near the graves of so many men that fought for their country, fought for either the Union or in some cases the South, but fought for what they thought were their rights in the Civil War. Now, this story today is an interesting story. It's actually from directly connected to Tom Milholland. You guys all know Tom. He's been on our show many times. He works at the Historical Society, but it actually has to do with one of his ancestors. And it would directly impact the service of underage boys during the Civil War. So what we're going to do is we're going to go meet up with Tom at the gravesite right here in Washington Cemetery of one of his ancestors. Okay, so I have met up with Tom at the headstone of your ancestor. It's a really cool story. You were telling me about this the other day, and I thought, well, we've got to do something on this. We've got to tell this story, and it ties, right into our theme, with the anniversary of Antietam, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about at Spirits in the Garden is what it was like on the home front. What people were feeling away from the war, but also what, like some of our guests. We've got Jonathan Letterman, so we're going to be talking about him directly involved in Antietam and how his battlefield medicine strategies were implemented. We're going to be talking to Lieutenant Colonel Norton McGiffin, and he did recruiting. And so he's going to be talking about what it was like with that after those first 3 months, with people thought, oh, this is going to be a really quick thing, and then it wasn't, and what it was like recruiting after that. And then our very special guest is President Abraham Lincoln, and he's going to be talking about how Antietam influenced him with the Emancipation Proclamation. Then, of course, our host is going to be Madeline Lemoyne, and she will kind of we'll talk a little bit about what it was like on the home front and what things that she read in the papers and what people were feeling. So this ties really right into that, especially with Norton McGiffin and the recruiting. So I'm going to just stop talking and let Tom tell a story. So
it does, Clay. So interesting that Norton McGiffin is one of our hosts for Spirits in the Garden this year, because this man here, Theodore Turner, who was born in 1843, ended up serving under Norton McGiffin in the perhaps little known 6th Pennsylvania Militia, which was a special purpose militia that was called out by the governor of Pennsylvania in September of 1862, when the rebel army started threatening the southern border of Pennsylvania.
Because that was Lee's plan was to try to take the war north a little bit. He was moving into Maryland, wanted to move into Maryland, and then eventually Pennsylvania. And that's actually one of the things Madeline talks about is, this idea, this fear that this war that had been down south might be right here.
Yes. So that's exactly right. And Lee was wanting to score a victory on northern soil to attract financing from overseas to the Confederate armies, and this 6th Pennsylvania Militia was formed. Two companies of this militia from Washington County, So Theodore M. Turner served in McGiffen's company, which was Company A, and it was called the McGiffen Riflemen. They, in fact, mustered in here in the first week of September, marched down near Chambersburg, PA, and they basically set up camp in Chambersburg to be called into action if necessary. Now, as it turned out, it wasn't necessary. Antietam, the Battle of Antietam occurred, and Lee retreated southward or moved southward as opposed to northward. So the 6th Pennsylvania Militia, the service of the militia was only as a rear guard protection force, and they didn't see any combat whatsoever.
Okay.
The composition of that Company A was both men who were well over military age and young boys like Theodore Turner who were under military age.
And how old was he?
He was 19.
Oh, okay.
At the time, that would have been too young for him to serve in a regular U.S. Army, a regular Pennsylvania regiment.
As the war went on, did they lower that number, or was it it was 21, right?
Yeah, I think it was, Clay. I'm not sure about that, but at that point in time, it was not old enough to enlist in a Pennsylvania volunteer unit. So in late September 28th maybe, the 6th Militia Company A returns to Pittsburgh from Chambersburg. And it seems as though 19-year-old Theodore Turner here decided that he liked the spirit of adventure that he got from marching with the militia down to Chambersburg, and he sought to enlist, but may have been rebuffed because of his age, but somehow he ended up becoming a substitute in the 100th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment. And the 100th Pennsylvania was known as the Roundhead Regiment. So he was able to somehow enlist as a substitute, meaning that he got paid by another man to take his place, was formally enlisted, and started serving. Now, they didn't yet leave Pittsburgh. Somehow, Theodore Turner's mother, who is
right up here,
buried right in this tomb right here, got wind of it, and somehow got word to him that what he was doing was not meeting her approval. And Theodore here decided that he would maybe be better off if he came home. So he actually somehow got out of his regimental duties, but was caught. And he was caught by the provost guard, the provost marshal, I think, in Pittsburgh. And he was apprehended as a deserter.
Oh, wow.
So that...
Even though he was too young.
Even though he was too young. So that touched off this legal dispute, which resulted in the outcome that was widely reported about underage soldiers serving. So in a nutshell, what happened, Clay, was that the mother, Elizabeth Turner, enlisted the services of a man who had been a Washington County attorney who was at that point practicing in Pittsburgh, and his name was James Heron Hopkins. James Heron Hopkins. And very well known, recorded in Crumrine's History of Washington County. And Elizabeth Turner asked Mr. Hopkins to assist in trying to get Theodore here out of the brig, which he had been thrown into because he was classified as a deserter. So the whole thing quickly spun up into Hopkins, on behalf of Elizabeth Turner, filing a writ of habeas corpus to the federal court. And it became a federal case. And long story short was that the writ of habeas corpus was approved under the authority of the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, who was Roger Taney. And then Theodore was brought out of the brig in front of a federal court that was presided by Judge Wilson McCandless. And McCandless made the decision that even though the enlistment officer was perhaps justified in enlisting Turner,
Right.
the fact that Turner was underage basically shielded him from being a deserter.
Okay.
So Judge McCandless ended up releasing Theodore M. Turner, who was, again, 19 years old, out of his service in the Roundheads. And in doing so, it enabled him to avoid this very serious charge of desertion, which was in those days it was punishable by, I think, a firing squad.
Oh, wow.
So the case was reported as a major news story in the Pittsburgh newspapers, and it had precedent for other families who were seeing their young people being, their young teenage sons being, enticed off into war. And in Turner's case here, had he served in the 100th Pennsylvania, the Roundhead Regiment, that was a combat unit. They were involved in some very serious combat. They were involved in the Second Bull Run. They were involved in Antietam itself. They were involved in the Battle of Fredericksburg. And then they got redeployed south to Vicksburg. So there was they were a serious, combat unit.
He would have seen war,
And
no doubt.
he would have
got that adventure that he was looking for.
Yeah, he might not have come back from it.
Wow.
So as it turned out, Turner ended up serving in the Civil War for the provost guard in Pittsburgh, probably the very same authority which had detained him. So the only thing that we can surmise is that maybe they grew fond of him when he was in their custody.
Right.
And they gave him kind of like a non-combat role that would have, at least placated his mother, Elizabeth, but yet he still served.
Okay.
So interesting story. There were other families who had the same circumstance of underage people, and the parents found out about it, tried to get their sons out of service. Some cases the sons were successfully brought out of the service, in other cases not.
Wow.
So interesting story. The home front, as you mentioned, the Civil War just didn't affect the soldiers. It affected everyone.
Right.
Families, men, women alike.
Huh.
So
Fascinating.
yeah.
And kind of changed. So he probably signed his parents' name to say that he was old enough, or how would he?
Signed some type of an oath, or gave some type of a verbal oath that he was 21 years and some months beyond 21 years.
Okay.
Which was a lie.
Right.
But he did it because he was enticed. He was really wanting to serve. And
so this case, really, that's what it was about, was these kids being able to sign or take an oath saying that they're older than they really are.
Right.
And there was now an argument that parents could have against that.
that's right.
Okay.
And it also, I think, reinforced the duty of enlistment officers to verify that the young men that they were enlisting were in fact of age.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's really cool. That's a great story. That's what, when Tom was telling me about it, we were I don't know, last week sometime we were talking about, Spirits in the Garden, and he said that he had a story tied to it. I'm like, oh, well, let's see what that is. And I thought it would be, it's a great story. Wanted to make sure we told it, but also, it's a great opportunity to lead up into Spirits in the Garden. So tickets are still available, as you watch this. It's probably around 7:30 tonight now. So as you're watching it, tickets are still available. If you go to wchspa.org, click on the online ticket form, you can buy your tickets directly online. There's charcuterie boxes from Chico Baccello. There's refreshments and dessert cookies, I guess, from Chico, but there's also going to be wonderful spirits. You've got Washington Winery, B&B Distillery, the Washington Brewing Company, Monday's Brewing Company, Liberty Pulse Spirits, Red Pump Distillery, Ridge Runner, and I feel like I'm probably missing someone. Big Bob's Honey, local honey. They're going to be there, but then you also have the spirits of Madeline Lemoyne, the First Lady of Washington, Lieutenant Colonel Norton McGiffin, Dr. Jonathan Letterman, and of course, President Abraham Lincoln, which I'm so excited about that we're going to have Lincoln there, in our gardens. So, come. The tickets are only $30. It's not that much for an incredible time, an incredible evening. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention those that are sponsoring this event. The Washington County Tourism Promotion Agency, they have been the presenting sponsor of this event since its inception, since its beginning in 2017, 18, something like that. But we also have Howard Hanna and Mesa Wood Construction, Range Resources, the Redevelopment Authority of the County of Washington, Citizens for Josh Kell, Joan and Roy Rizika, P. Douglas and Leslie Brock, and who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh, Stone Mile. I got to mention Stone Mile, of course. So, it's those sponsorships that make this possible, and also, of course, people attending, but, the sponsors, we can't thank them enough for continually sponsoring this event. Many of those, like Tourism and Howard Hanna and Stone Mile, those are multi-year sponsors. They've been doing it for several years now. Probably Tourism and Howard Hanna. Howard Hanna might be from the beginning as well. They've been around for a long time. And I've got to thank Jean Watson, a former board member of ours. She is the head of the committee for Spirits in the Garden and does so much to make this event happen. So thank you, Jean. Thank you, all the sponsors. Thank you, all the vendors. And thank you, President Lincoln, for coming. And Tom, thanks so much for telling your story today. This has been awesome. I'm so glad you got to tell it to everybody.
Thank you, Clay. Thank you.
So we'll see you hopefully on Saturday, September 10th from 6 to 9 at Spirits in the Garden. If we don't see you there, we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of Laid Back History.